One medium of entertainment I haven't really talked about in any of my videos is Japanese animation, or anime for short. I just simply never got around to much of it. It's not that I have a dislike for the art form. Far from it. I like anime just as much as any other storytelling medium, be it Western animation or live-action film. The reason I haven't talked about it really is because my exposure to it is rather limited. But it's not for lack of trying, because there's just so much anime out there. I am a lover of Japanese cinema since I've talked about tokusatsu, and I'm a passionate lover of samurai chambara pictures from the likes of Kurosawa, Kobayashi, etc., as well as period dramas in general from guys like Ozu and Mizoguchi. So I'm well traveled in the realm of Japanese media, just not as much in the realm of its animation. The reason for that, though, and I don't want to sound pretentious at all when I say this, but I have a very unique taste when it comes to anime. There's a lot of reasons why people enjoy anime, be it the over-the-top characters, spectacle-filled action, simple and uplifting emotional themes, gigantic epic-length narratives that comprise entire story arcs with lots of moving pieces, and lots of others I'm not listing here. But for me, the main thing that draws me to anime is the mood. What do I mean when I say this? Well, the anime that I enjoy the most comes from the 80s and 90s. I feel like that time period, there was something happening that made the shows, miniseries, and films of that time special. Stuff like Ghost in the Shell, Pat Labor 1 and 2, Angel's Egg, Memories, Serial Experiments Lane, hell, even Cowboy Bebop. All of these anime have this ethereal atmosphere and feeling to them that's difficult to describe with words. They all have this mystical, quiet, relaxed, cerebral, almost spiritual fairy tale-like feel or ambiance to them that I don't feel has been perfectly replicated in any other medium of art. Oh, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of Western film and TV that achieves this type of laid-back, calm, noir/fantasy atmosphere, but anime from this specific time period just does it entirely in its own way. This may be an opinion informed heavily by bias, since I experienced a lot of these anime at a young age, and the impact they left on my young mind may be coloring my perception a bit. But I feel like there's something to what I'm pointing out, even if I'm having a hard time articulating what exactly that special ingredient is that anime possesses. If there's one anime film that I feel embodies this vibe, as the young people call it, it would have to be 1998's Jin Roh, The Wolf Brigade. This may not come as a surprise if you read the title of the video, but fuck it, I'll say it anyways. I adore Jin Roh. I think it's a masterpiece of both animation and storytelling through the construction of mood and atmosphere within a film. Before I go any further, I'm going to explain the backstory and basic plot setup of Jin Roh in as quick and concise a manner as possible, which will not be easy since the world and plot of this film is pretty dense with detail and history. You don't have to worry about spoilers at this point in the video, however. So here we go. Jin Roh, The Wolf Brigade is set in 1950s Japan. But see, it's not the 1950s that you and I know. Jin Roh is an alternate history franchise. Yes, this is part of a franchise. I'll get into that later. And in case you're wondering, no, you do not need to have any familiarity with the franchise in order to enjoy the film. Anyway, the world of Jin Roh is set in a dystopian, alternate 1950s timeline where Germany won World War II and Japan was part of the Allied forces, meaning that Germany were the ones who dropped the nukes, and after abandoning the Nazi regime after Hitler's successful assassination during Operation Valkyrie, were the ones to occupy Japan after the war's ending, leading to a mix of two cultures, similar to how the American occupation in real life went down. The world of Jin Roh is very German-inspired, from the clothes, the weapons, the vehicles, to, sadly, the form of government. With the new German influences, Japan's government becomes an authoritarian police state that expands its urban reach across the whole country at the expense of the people. And as a result, an alliance of united anti-government terrorist groups, called the Sect, rises up and causes all kinds of trouble. As a response, the government creates an elite army of intimidating, badass anti-terrorist super cops, officially known as the Special Unit, unofficially known as Kerberos, because of the unit's heraldry depicting the eponymous triple-headed hound of Hades. Armed with classic World War II SS firearms and terrifying black stormtrooper-inspired armor, complete with a gas mask-like face guard with glowing red eyes for extra fear factor, the Kerberos soldiers are conscripted and trained to eliminate the government's enemies with machine-like precision and coldness. Are you still with me? I realize that was a lot of information I just went over, but it's important for me to explain all this so I can actually get into the plot of the movie. Jin Roh actually begins with a riot in Tokyo that's taken advantage of when the sect supply the rioters with bombs and Molotov cocktails delivered by a young female courier known as a Red Riding Hood. Once the riot reaches a boiling point, the sect are driven into the sewers where they are brutally assaulted and killed in a surprise attack by the Special Unit. The movie's plot starts proper when one of the Kerberos officers, Kazuki Fusei, is standing face to face with the courier girl while she's holding a bomb, and fails to shoot her, freezing up in the process and nearly getting half of his squad killed when the girl blows herself up in front of him. Because of his inaction, Fusei is reprimanded by a board of inquiry and forced to be put through his training once more. While this entire incident stokes the flames of a conspiracy for the Tokyo branch of Japan's Public Security Bureau to dissolve the Special Unit, and use Fusei as the catalyst for it. During his time off, Fusei also meets a charming young woman named Kei, who is the sister of the courier who kills herself in front of him. In spite of that, she takes a liking to him, and amidst all the nastiness and plotting, the two of them develop something of a tragic romance. Tragic for reasons I'll get into later on. That's the setup for the plot of Jin Roh in a nutshell. From this point on, it's going to be spoiler heavy, so if you've not seen the film, I advise you to do so before continuing on. And you should just do so anyway, because it's an incredible film that you should see if you enjoy animation, especially animation from the Far East. That's all I'll say. Now, you may have noticed that the film's plotline is filled with quite a bit of political intrigue, but I can assure you when you actually sit down to watch it, the story is not that difficult to follow. Yeah, there's a lot of history and information to absorb in the first 10 or so minutes, but once you get over that hump, the conspiracies and scheming all make sense pretty quickly. But really, the main focus of this film is not the political thriller stuff. This is not Reacher or Patriot Games, no. If anything, Jin Roh is a tragic, mystical fairy tale fantasy film wearing the clothes of a historical dystopian thriller. The one thing that everyone who sees this film remembers about it is the frequent and seemingly overbearing vocal references to the tale of Little Red Riding Hood. Obviously, I mentioned already that the young girls the sect use as couriers are referred to as Red Riding Hoods. But believe me when I say the film is not subtle about its allusions to the classic tale. Kei gives Fusei a copy of the story written in German, and there are voiceovers and dialogue throughout the film quoting passages from the story verbatim.
女の子が着物を脱いで寝台に近づくと、母さんは頭巾を顔の方までかぶって奇妙な格好をして寝ていました。母さん、なんて大きな耳をしてるの。だからお前の言うことが聞こえるのさ。母さん、なんて大きな目をしてるの。これでなければお前がよく見えやしないからさ。母さん、なんて大きな爪なの。これでなければお前をうまくつかめやしないからさ。
The obvious parallels here would be that Fusei and all the other unit members are wolves, and his budding relationship with Kei is destined to end in tragedy because that's his nature. Just like the wolf ends up devouring Red Riding Hood in the story. But I think it goes quite a bit deeper than that. I think the film is legitimately trying to tell us something with the specific passages from the story that are quoted. Nearly all parts of the story in the film are the ones that have to do with the wolf impersonating Red Riding Hood's grandmother. This is especially important for the last scene. For the sake of context in discussing the last scene, the film's last act reveals that Fusei was part of a small group within the special unit known as the Wolf Brigade, hence the film's subtitle. In addition, it's revealed that Kei was not the sister of the girl who killed herself at the start, but a mole planted by the Public Security Bureau intended to frame Fusei as conspiring with the terrorists, since Kei did have prior association with the sect. Fusei and the other members of the Wolf Brigade know about this and end up staging a trap where Fusei dons his Kerberos armor and slaughters the whole lot of them, including his own close friend. In the very last scene of the film, Fusei is instructed by his commander to kill Kei, so she can never be captured and used against the Kerberos organization by any other entity. What follows is one of the most intense and heartbreaking death scenes in any film I've seen. This camera pan that moves to reveal Kei is perfect, because it gives the audience a whiplash effect that exactly mirrors Fusei's emotional state at the notion of what he now has to do. Right before being executed, Kei quotes the famous line, By the way, this entire scene happens with no score, letting the suspense and emotions build naturally. The last image of Fusei standing like a statue, utterly broken by what he's now become, all of this adds up to one of the most brutal and gut-stomping endings in any film. The way that this connects to the passages from Red Riding Hood is that this film chooses to focus specifically on the parts of the story where the wolf is impersonating a human. This is significant in terms of theme because, in reality, that, at least to me, is what Jin Roh is about. It's about the fight to be human, to be free, and what it costs to devote yourself wholly to some political or dubious cause that you yourself are separate from. Both Fusei and Kei are tools of some type of political puppet master, whether it be the armed police force, public security, or the sect. That's part of the reason as to why their love story is so touching and heartbreaking. Throughout the film, these scant moments where they simply enjoy each other's company are the most they can feel like people, to feel like human beings rather than animals, rather than tools for others. That's the way I personally interpret Jin Roh. All the cool armor, brutal action, beautiful music, breathtaking animation and art, it all serves a narrative that serves as a cautionary tale about how military, government, or any other type of clandestine entities can dehumanize people and reduce them to being nothing more but pawns on a chessboard. Hell, it's even in the title. The word Jin Roh is the Japanese term that translates to werewolf or wolfman roughly, emphasizing the struggling duality between being an unfeeling puppet to a faceless power or being a free-thinking person. The struggle between being a wolf or a man. This message is also not unique to Jin Roh. There's tons of Japanese media that explores this topic. The theme of how the ruling government treats its servants like animals and disposable things rather than human beings worthy of human dignity. It's incredibly prevalent in not just anime but lots of genres. Hell, even live-action samurai films like Harakiri. There's even a pretty acclaimed Japanese film that came out recently that's all about this very topic. Yes, I just compared Jin Roh to Godzilla. Everything I'm saying here is purely speculation, so if anyone watching this is more informed on the topic, don't be afraid to correct me. But I think this bitterness towards the government that permeates so many Japanese works of art comes a lot from the way soldiers were treated in World War II. Everyone from the infantrymen to kamikaze pilots were required to have this fanatical devotion to the Emperor and see their own lives as worthless. Godzilla Minus One explores this idea very thoroughly, and the fact that Jin Roh is set only a decade after World War II and deals with this whole government corruption angle, I think puts it in the same playing field for sure. The film's heart-crushing ending also enhances the fairy tale motif, because fairy tales themselves often have tragic endings meant to make the reader wary of mankind's shortcomings. It also helps that both Fusei and Kei are compelling characters and their relationship feels natural and not rushed or forced. They both feel comfortable opening up and being vulnerable with each other, and find warmth when all the other people in their lives just see them as things. But yeah, enough about the abstract shit. Let's talk craftsmanship, because my god does Jin Roh strike a resounding home run in this department as well. I make no exaggeration when I say this is one of the most beautiful hand-drawn films ever made. I dare you to find a single frame of this film that looks sloppy or off-model. You simply can't. Even something as simple and mundane as a girl falling down a slide is animated with clear time and detail. Hell, some moments are just so fluidly animated they look borderline rotoscoped. There's also a clear passion for the time period and the detail of all the technology and weapons. If you have an enthusiasm for World War II period weapons, you'll delight in seeing all the different German guns rendered in highly detailed hand-drawn fidelity down to the smallest bolt. Lots of other people have highlighted this as well, but the Kerberos armor has also become quite iconic, spawning some very well-known imitators in Western media. So yeah, the film's art and animation are superb, but it's not just the animation quality that makes this film a visual marvel. The color palette and the certain glow a lot of the scenes have give this film a very old-school celluloid grittiness that you would find in movies made during the 50s and earlier, which is apparently an intentional artistic choice on the part of the animators to help sell the time period and setting. But I think beyond all of that, when I think of this film's visuals, the main thing that comes to mind is how it uses darkness. There are so many scenes where characters are framed against ominous pitch-black backdrops that would almost feel appropriate for a horror film or a dark and tragic fairy tale. It's pretty obvious that much of this film was drawn on black backdrops and paper, which was a pretty common thing in 80s and 90s animation, even with Western animation like Batman the Animated Series. I think having said all this, I'm also unbelievably grateful that this film was also cel animated. This was during a time where hand-drawn cel animation was on its way out in both Western and Eastern animation industries, and clean, grain-free computer backdrops became the default canvas for animators. All the stylistic flourishes this film uses that I just pointed out would not have really worked as well if it was all done against a pure, clean digital environment. At least to me. The hands-on cel drawings that this film employs complement the gritty, somber, dystopian world that the action happens in. But even more so than that is the sound and music. The film's composer, Hajime Mizoguchi, really created a soundscape that serves as the emotional skeleton of the entire film. Despite the film's grim, corrupt, violent, and seemingly hopeless setting, the score is beautiful, especially during the soft and tender scenes between Fusei and Kei. It's so beautiful that I'm actually using it as the background soundtrack to this video. And even during the more intense and serious parts, the score takes not really an action film approach, so much as a deliberate and slowly escalating onslaught of strings and brass. During the film's action scenes, the music is either slow and ominous or simply absent entirely, but it still somehow manages to work. I absolutely love when movies use their scores in imaginative and unique ways to deliver their beats and scenes to the audience, as you've no doubt picked up on in my other videos. Jin Roh's quiet and brooding soundscape creates a quiet and haunting tone that will leave an indelible mark on you as a viewer. It sure as hell did so for me. And that to me is what makes this type of anime truly special. It's also why I love genres like film noir and even some horror and sci-fi films like Blade Runner in 2001. Because there are countless films of all these genres that give off this contemplative, almost externalist type of essence to them. I think the pure black backgrounds I mentioned before add a lot to this feeling. These are really the types of media that work best when you watch them at night with all the lights turned off. I might not be making a whole lot of sense here, but the main point I'm trying to make is that anime and overall media like Jin Roh just make me feel a certain way that's so unique and special. That's purely my own subjective experience though. I can't guarantee that everyone else will feel the same, but I still recommend the film because I think it's an incredible film either way you slice it. As I mentioned earlier, Jin Roh is technically part of a franchise, officially known as the Kerberos Saga. The greater franchise is made up of a series of radio dramas, live-action films, manga, and obviously this film. I haven't experienced any of these other works, so another huge strength of this film is that you can go into it not having read or watched any of the other media in the series and still know what's happening. It's accessible to outsiders as well as fans. The franchise was created by filmmaker Mamoru Oshii, who, if you've not heard his name, you've likely seen his work. He was the director of the 1995 anime film adaptation of Ghost in the Shell, as well as creating Patlabor and directing Angel's Egg, all of which are some of my absolute favorite anime ever. And he served as the writer of Jin Roh. The directing duties he passed on to one of his co-workers on Ghost in the Shell, Hiroyuki Okiura. I feel like Okiura's presence was a blessing since he stubbornly insisted that the film be drawn on cells when the entire industry was becoming more computerized. The film's entire animation process took 3 whole years, and the studio ended up going through 80,000 cells of animation. How they got the money for that, I have no clue, but damn do the results speak for themselves. All of these qualities add up to a film that does something that a lot of films made now don't do anymore. It immerses you. Movies and anime that accomplish the dark, minimalistic atmosphere of Jin Roh are sadly rare because that style of storytelling just isn't very marketable. This is made pretty obvious by the Korean-made live-action film Ilong, The Wolf Brigade, which completely ditches the feel of Jin Roh and is just a straight-up action movie. It's a fun action movie, don't get me wrong. If you just want some solid entertainment with the iconic Kerberos suits, then Ilong has you covered. But if you want a remake that captures the spirit of the original, then you won't find it with this. So yeah, I think I've said just about all I can about Jin Roh. It's one of the best animated films ever made, and it leaves a very specific effect on me every time I watch it. So if you're someone who loves animation, especially from Japan, and you haven't seen this film, I cannot recommend it enough. That's all for now, everyone. I'm about to start on another video soon, so I'll see you all later. Take care.